Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku has grimoire instead of one for all. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not fair. That was the first lesson Izuku Midoriya ever learned. It wasn't a lesson taught in a classroom, written on a chalkboard with dusty white chalk. It was a lesson carved into the very genetic sequence of humanity, a truth as absolute as gravity. He learned it at the age of 4, in a doctor's office that smelled of antiseptic and shattered dreams. You should probably give it up. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The doctor, a man with a mustache that looked like a caterpillar clinging to his lip for dear life, leaned back in his chair. He tapped a pen against the clipboard, indifferent to the sound of a child's world imploding. Beside Izuku, his mother, Inko, went rigid. Doctor, surely there's a mistake? The other kindergartners have all started manifesting their powers. Izuku is the only one who... Excuse me, Mrs. Midoriya, the doctor interrupted, pointing to the X-ray illuminated on the wall. You see this? It's the pinky toe. A person with a quirk has a streamlined body, an evolution. They only have one joint here. Izuku has two. It's an archaic trait. A leftover. The doctor looked down at the green-haired boy, who was clutching an action figure of All Might, the symbol of peace, so tightly that the plastic was digging into his palm. He has no quirk factor, the doctor delivered the verdict. He is quirkless. That night, the rain lashed against the windows of the Midoriya apartment, mimicking the storm inside the young boy's heart. He sat in front of the computer screen, watching the same video he had watched 1,000 times. The debut of All Might. The hero smiled as he carried people out of the disaster zone, laughing in the face of fear. He's fearless. He saves everyone with a smile. Inko entered the room. She saw her son trembling, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. Tears bubbled in his large, green eyes, overflowing and spilling down his freckled cheeks. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. Can I still be a hero like him? He wanted her to say yes. He needed her to say that biology didn't matter, that the extra joint in his toe didn't define his soul. He needed her to tell him that the fire inside his chest was real, but she didn't. Inko rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry, she cried for him. She cried because she loved him, and because she believed the world would break him. But her apology felt like a confirmation. It was the final nail in the coffin of his dreams. I didn't want you to apologize, Izuku thought, though he couldn't vocalize it. I wanted you to tell me that I could do it. The world was not fair. But Izuku Midoriya, despite the universe screaming at him to stop, refused to listen. 10 years later, the sound of an explosion rattled the windows of Aldera Junior High. Smoke drifted up from a desk in the back row, smelling of burnt caramel and nitroglycerin. Hey, Deku! Katsuki Bakugo barked, his palms popping with small, threatening sparks. Don't tell me you're still trying for UA? You're gonna take the entrance exam? You! The classroom erupted into laughter. It was a chorus of mockery that Izuku had become intimately familiar with. He shrank into his seat, trying to make himself as small as possible. Well, there's no rule against it, Izuku stammered, holding his hands up defensively. They got rid of the quirk requirement years ago. I can still try. Try! Bakugo slammed his hand onto Izuku's desk, the force of the explosion knocking Izuku backward out of his chair. You're taking the entrance exam just to try? What can you do, huh? You're quirkless. You're worse than the rejects. You're nothing. Izuku scrambled back, hitting the wall. The class watched with cruel amusement. In this society, power was virtue. Weakness was a sin. And Izuku was the greatest sinner of them all. That's not true, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice trembling but his eyes looking for an escape. I've studied heroics for years. I have notes. I have strategy. Strategy? Bakugo snatched the notebook sitting on Izuku's desk. The cover read, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. You think scribbling in a diary makes you a hero? Boom! With a casual flex of his palms, Bakugo detonated the notebook. The pages blackened and curled. Before Izuku could protest, Bakugo tossed the smoking book out the open window. Izuku watched in horror as his hard work, his years of obsessive observation, tumbled down 3 stories into the koi pond below. "Here's a word of advice," Bakugo said, leaning in close. His red eyes were filled with a terrifying mix of arrogance and pity. "Don't even think of applying to UA. You'll just die. I'm doing you a favor." The bell rang, signaling the end of the day. As the students filtered out, whispering and laughing, Bakugo stopped at the door. He glanced back over his shoulder. "If you want to be a hero that badly, there's actually a quick way to do it." Izuku froze. "Believe that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life," Bakugo sneered, "and take a swan dive off the roof of the building." The room went silent. Izuku turned, his fists clenched, his teeth grinding together. For a second, just a split second, rage flared in his chest, hot and volatile. But then he saw Bakugo's hands crackle with explosions, a reminder of the gap between them. Izuku unclenched his fists. He didn't say a word. He just picked up his bag and walked out. Outside, he found his notebook bobbing in the koi pond. The fish were nibbling at the burned edges. "Stupid fish," Izuku muttered, fishing the book out. "That's not food." He wiped the grime off the cover. The ink had run, but the words were still legible. "Hero analysis. Stupid Kaken," he whispered to the empty air. "If I actually jumped, that would be instigation of suicide. You couldn't become a hero with a record like that." He walked home, taking the long route to avoid people. He needed to think. He needed to reconstruct the fortress of optimism he built every day, the one the world spent every day bombarding. Is he right? The thought crept in like a cold draft. Does it really matter how hard I try? Without a quirk, am I just empty? He walked into the underpass, the shadows lengthening around him. The tunnel was cool and damp. His footsteps echoed, a lonely rhythm against the concrete. "No," he told himself. "I can't give up. Not yet. I just have to try harder than everyone else. I have to be smarter. I have to be..." A wet, slurping sound came from the manhole cover behind him. Izuku turned around. A mass of dark green sludge rose from the grate, expanding like a living nightmare. 2 manic, bulging eyes floated in the liquid, fixating on him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed, his voice gurgling like a blocked drain. Izuku took a step back, panic seizing his chest. What? "You'll do nicely, kid," the sludge lunged. Izuku tried to run, but he was too slow. The fluid mass crashed over him, cold and viscous. It smelled of sewage and rot. It forced its way into his nose, his mouth, cutting off his air. "Don't struggle," the villain whispered into his ear, the sludge vibrating. "It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. I just need to hide inside you until the hero leaves town. I can't breathe." Izuku clawed at the liquid, his fingers sinking uselessly into the muck. He couldn't get a grip. He couldn't push it away. "I'm dying." The realization was stark and terrifying. This was it. No grand battle. No heroic sacrifice. He was going to die in a tunnel, drowned by a villain made of sludge, simply because he was weak. His vision began to blur. Black spots danced in his eyes. His strength faded. "Is this the end? Mom. I'm sorry." Just as the darkness threatened to claim him completely, the manhole cover exploded upward. "Have no fear!" A voice boom echoed through the tunnel, deep and resonant, shaking the very concrete. "For I am here." Through the blurring sludge, Izuku saw a figure blocked out by the light. A massive silhouette. A fist pulled back, glowing with raw power. Texas. Smash! The punch didn't even touch the villain. The wind pressure alone was like a hurricane. The air compressed and detonated, blasting the sludge villain apart, scattering him against the walls of the tunnel. Air rushed back into Izuku's lungs. He gasped, coughing violently, collapsing onto the pavement. As he wiped the slime from his eyes, he looked up. Standing there, tall and imposing, bathed in the light from the tunnel exit, was the man from the video. The man from his dreams, All Might. The next 10 minutes were a blur of fanba panic. All Might had signed his notebook, quickly and efficiently. Izuku had bowed so many times his back hurt. But as All Might prepared to leap away, the question, burned in Izuku's throat. He couldn't let him leave. Not without asking. As All Might launched himself into the sky, Izuku did something reckless. He grabbed onto the hero's leg. What followed was a terrifying flight over the city, a struggle against wind resistance, and an eventual landing on a rooftop. And then, the smoke. I really have to go, kid, All Might said, but steam began to pour off his body. Wait! Izuku pleaded. I have to know. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero like you? Can I serve justice? The steam cleared. And where the Greek god of a man had stood, there was now a skeletal, emaciated figure with sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. Izuku screamed. An impostor? I assure you, I am All Might, the man sighed, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. He sat down heavily. He lifted his shirt to reveal a horrific scar, a spiderweb of purple, mangled tissue that covered half his torso. 5 years ago, a villain did this to me, All Might explained, his voice weary. My respiratory system was decimated. My stomach was removed. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Izuku stared in horror. The symbol of peace was broken. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives, All Might said, looking Izuku dead in the eye. Some villains just can't be beaten without power. So, can you be a hero without a quirk? The world seemed to stop spinning. Izuku held his breath. No, All Might said softly. The word hit Izuku harder than the sludge villain had. I cannot simply say yes because that would be irresponsible, All Might continued. If you want to help people, you could become a police officer. They get teased a lot, but it's a respectable job. All Might stood up and walked toward the door leading to the stairs. It's not wrong to dream. But you have to see reality, young man. The door clicked shut. Izuku was left alone on the roof. The sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the city. Izuku stood there for a long time. The wind ruffled his curly green hair. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. You have to see reality. He had heard it from his doctor. From his mother. From Bakugo. And now, from the greatest hero in the world. I guess, that's it then, Izuku whispered. His voice sounded hollow, drained of all the energy that usually animated him. He walked down the stairs. He walked through the streets. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The notebook in his hand, signed by All Might, felt like a tombstone. Don't even think of applying to UA. Maybe Bakugo was right. Maybe he should just... Boom! An explosion rocked the street a few blocks away. Izuku flinched. Instinctively, his feet turned toward the sound. It was habit. Hero analysis. Check the scene. Take notes. Stop it, he told himself. You're not a hero. You're just a fangirl. Go home. But his legs didn't listen. He wandered toward the crowd that had gathered near the Tatooine shopping district. Flames were licking up the side of a building. Heroes were standing around, looking helpless. Why aren't they doing anything? Izuku muttered, peering through the gaps in the crowd. They can't, a bystander said. The villain has a hostage. And the sludge is keeping everyone back. Sludge? Izuku's blood ran cold. He pushed his way to the front of the barricade. In the center of an inferno, the sludge villain, the one All Might had captured, the one Izuku must have knocked loose during the flight, had reassembled. And he had someone. A boy was trapped in the muck, only his face visible. He was thrashing, screaming, setting off explosions in a desperate attempt to break free. But the explosions were only feeding the fires around them. It was Bakugo. My body, it won't move! Death Arms yelled, gripping a stop sign. I can't get a grip on him. I need water. Kamui Wood shouted, shielding his face from the heat. I can't fit in there. Empty Lady cried from the back. They were making excuses. They were waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. They were watching a middle schooler suffocate. Izuku looked at Bakugo. Their eyes met. Bakugo wasn't looking at him with arrogance. He wasn't looking at him with hatred. His eyes were wide, filled with a primal, terrified plea. Help me. The logic in Izuku's brain shut down. The doctor's voice, his mother's apology, All Might's rejection, they all vanished. Izuku's feet hit the pavement. Hey! Come back here, kid! You'll die! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't hear him. He sprinted past the police tape. The heat was intense, stinging his eyebrows. The smell of burning rubber filled his nose. You again? The sludge villain roared, his eyes narrowing. I'll kill you this time. Izuku threw his backpack. It was a desperate, flailing motion. The bag flew through the air and the metal buckle struck the villain in the eye. Arg! The villain recoiled, the sludge loosening for a fraction of a second. Izuku skidded to a halt in front of Bakugo. He clawed at the sludge with his bare hands. It was hot and slimy, refusing to yield. Kaken! Izuku cried. Why are you here? Bakugo coughed, his voice ragged. I don't know. Izuku screamed, tears streaming down his face, evaporating in the heat. My legs, they just moved on their own. You looked like you were asking for help. He pulled. He pulled with everything he had. But he was just a quirkless boy. He had no super strength. He had no telekinesis. He was weak. The sludge villain recovered. The eye healed. The massive liquid arm rose up, casting a shadow over Izuku. You pests, the villain growled. I'm done playing with you. Die. The arm swung down. Time seemed to slow. Izuku looked at the incoming death. He looked at Bakugo's horrified face. He felt the heat of the fire. I want to save him. It was a singular, burning thought. It wasn't about being a hero for fame. It wasn't about proving All Might wrong. It was a pure, unadulterated desire to protect. I want to save him. I need power. Any power. Someone, anyone, give me the strength to save him. Deep within the fabric of reality, or perhaps deep within the dormant lineage of a forgotten ancestor, something answered. It wasn't a snap like a quirk activating. It wasn't a biological switch. It was a tear. The air around Izuku suddenly grew heavy. The roar of the fire seemed to dampen, muffled by an unseen pressure. The orange glow of the flames turned grayscale for a heartbeat. Black and red sparks erupted from the air in front of Izuku. They weren't electrical. They looked like tears in the world itself. Thump! Something heavy materialized out of the void and hovered in front of Izuku. It was a book, but not like any book he had ever seen. It was old, bound and tattered, black and leather that looked like burnt skin. On the cover, faintly glowing in a dirty crimson light, was a clover. A 5-leaf clover. The sludge villain paused, confused. What is that? A summoning quirk? Izuku stared at the grimoire. He didn't know what it was. He had never seen it before. But as it hovered there, pulsating with a dark, rhythmic energy, he felt a pull. A connection. The book flipped open violently, the pages turning so fast they were a blur. It stopped on a page that was completely black. A handle protruded from the page. Izuku didn't think. Instinct took the wheel. He reached out and grabbed the handle. It was heavy. Unimaginably heavy. It felt like grabbing a condensed piece of gravity. His muscles screamed instantly. His bones creaked. Move! With a roar that ripped from his throat, Izuku pulled. From the small book, he dragged out a massive sword. It was a hunk of iron, ancient and rusted, taller than he was and nearly as wide. It looked less like a weapon and more like a slab of ruin. What are you gonna do with that rusty toothpick? The sludge villain laughed, bringing his liquid hammer down. Izuku didn't know how to use a sword. He just swung. He swung with panic and desperation, heaving the massive weight of the iron upward to meet the sludge. The blade met the liquid. Normally, a physical object would just pass through the fluid, displacing it but doing no damage. But this sword was different. When the rusted iron touched the sludge, there was no splash. There was a sound like static, zzzrrt, and a shockwave of silence. The sludge didn't separate. It vanished. Gah! The villain screamed. Where the sword had passed, the sludge had been erased, deleted from existence. The anti-magic energy coating the blades severed the control the villain had over his own body. The cohesive force that held his liquid form together shattered. The villain's massive arm collapsed into harmless, dirty water. My quirk! The villain shrieked. I can't feel my quirk. What did you do? Izuku stumbled under the weight of the sword, the tips smashing into the concrete, cracking the pavement. He looked at the weapon in shock. The blade was dull, caked in dirt and grime, but it pulsated with an ominous energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. Bakugo stared at Izuku, his jaw unhinged. Deku, the sludge villain, now reduced to a puddle with a face, tried to reform. He pushed his quirk, trying to solidify. Izuku gritted his teeth. He lifted the sword again. It took 2 hands and every ounce of strength in his back. Let him go! Izuku brought the flat of the blade down on the main mass of the villain. Wham! The impact was heavy, but the effect was metaphysical. The shockwave of anti-magic rippled through the puddle. The villain's eyes rolled back. His form destabilized completely, turning from living slime into inert sewage. He couldn't hold his shape. He couldn't move. The fire around them seemed to recoil from the sword, the flames dying down as if afraid to touch the black energy radiating from it. Silence descended on the street. The heroes stared. The crowd stared. Bakugo, now free and sitting in a puddle of dirty water, stared. And Izuku, panting heavily, his arms shaking violently, stood over the defeated villain, clutching a sword that shouldn't exist, hovering next to a book that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. Izuku gasped, his vision swimming. I saved. The adrenaline crashed. The weight of the sword became too much. He dropped it. As soon as the sword left his hand, it dissolved into black ash and was sucked back into the grimoire. The book snapped shut, hovered for a second, and then gently floated down to rest on Izuku's hip, as if attached to an invisible belt. Detroit. Smash! Suddenly, the wind pressure returned. All Might, who had been watching from the crowd, pushing past his limit, realized the danger was over but the atmosphere needed saving. He launched a punch at the sky, the sheer force creating an updraft that changed the weather instantly. Rain began to fall. The crowd erupted into cheers for All Might. He changed the weather. He's amazing! But All Might wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at the small, green-haired boy collapsing to his knees in the rain. The aftermath was a confused mess. The police arrived and scraped the unconscious sludge villain into secure containers. The paramedics checked on Bakugo, and then came the scolding. Are you insane? Death Arms yelled, pointing a finger in Izuku's face. You entered a hazardous zone without a license. You have no combat training. You could have gotten yourself killed and the hostage killed. That sword, Kamui said, eyeing Izuku suspiciously. That was an unregistered quirk usage. What was that? A summoning type? Why is it so rusty? Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. The grimoire sat on his lap. He couldn't open it. He tried, but the cover wouldn't budge. I don't know, Izuku whispered. I'm quirkless. I don't have a quirk. Don't lie to us, kid, Death Arms scoffed. We all saw that. You summoned a giant weapon and neutralized the villain. That's a quirk, but the doctor said. Izuku trailed off. Meanwhile, the heroes were praising Bakugo. You were amazing, kid! Empty Lady gushed. That mental fortitude. And those explosions. You're definitely going to be a top hero. Bakugo didn't answer them. He just stared at Izuku. His red eyes were focused on the dirty book on Izuku's lap. He looked furious, confused, and shaken. Eventually, the police let Izuku go with a strict warning. They classified the incident as an accidental quirk awakening caused by extreme stress. They told him to register his quirk immediately or face legal action. Izuku walked home in a daze. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. I have a quirk? He looked down at the book. It was floating by his side now. He couldn't get rid of it. If he walked, it followed. If he stopped, it hovered. It was like a loyal, demonic pet. No. This doesn't feel like a quirk, Izuku analyzed, his mind racing. Quirks are biological. They use stamina. They feel like flexing a muscle. This felt external. Like I was borrowing something. DKU. Izuku jumped and turned around. Bakugo was running after him. Kaken? Bakugo stopped a few feet away, panting. He looked at Izuku, his face twisting into a scowl. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo shouted. And I didn't need it. I was fine. I would have broken free on my own. Izuku flinched. I know, I just... And don't think this changes anything. Bakugo pointed at the grimoire. So you finally got a quirk. Great. It's some dirty old book and a rusty sword. It suits you. It's garbage. You're still garbage. Bakugo turned around and stomped off. But he stopped after a few steps. He didn't look back, but his shoulders were stiff. But, Bakugo muttered, barely audible. You didn't die. He walked away into the night. Izuku blinked. That was as close to a thank you as Bakugo was ever going to get. Izuku turned back toward his house. A small smile touched his lips. He wasn't garbage. Not today. Today, he had done something. I am here. Izuku yelped as All Might slid out from around a corner, striking a pose before instantly deflating into a cloud of blood and steam. All Might? Izuku gasped. Why are you here? You were surrounded by reporters. I shook them off, All Might said, wiping blood from his chin. I stand for justice, not sound bites. The skeletal hero straightened up, looking at Izuku with a serious expression. Young man. I have a confession to make. And an apology. Izuku stood straighter. The grimoire hovered silently between them. I told you to give up, All Might said. I told you to face reality. And yet of all the people there, the pros, the bystanders, and me, you were the only one who acted. All Might placed a hand on his chest. You were timid. You were quirkless. And yet you moved. Top heroes have stories about their school days, and most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku's eyes widened. Tears began to well up again. That happened to you today, didn't it? Yes, Izuku choked out. You told me you didn't have a quirk, All Might said, looking at the floating book. And perhaps, biologically, you don't. That power, it feels different. Ancient. But the power didn't make you move. Your heart did. All Might stepped closer. The setting sun behind him cast him in a golden glow. I was wrong to judge you based on your biology. A hero isn't defined by their power, but by their spirit. Izuku fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The dam broke. The tears flowed freely, washing away 10 years of pain, 10 years of I'm sorry, 10 years of being a ghost. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice firm and kind. You can become a hero, Izuku cried. He cried into the pavement, his forehead touching the ground. Above him, the 5-leaf grimoire glowed with a faint, reddish-black aura. It seemed to be observing the scene. It didn't offer comfort. It didn't offer warmth. It offered power, and for the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya had the means to grasp it. Later that night, in the quiet of his bedroom, Izuku sat at his desk. The grimoire was resting on the wood surface. It looked innocuous now, like a prop from a horror movie. What are you? Izuku whispered. He reached out and touched the cover. It was warm. He tried to open it again. This time, it yielded. The cover creaked open. The pages were filled with strange symbols. Not Japanese. Not English. Not any language he recognized. They looked like scribbles of madness, except for the first page. As he stared at it, the ink seemed to rearrange itself, twisting and turning until it formed legible text. It wasn't a spell. It wasn't an instruction manual. It was a single word, etched in rough, jagged strokes. Anti-magic. Izuku traced the word with his finger. Anti-magic? He murmured. Does it mean anti-quirk? He looked at his hand. He remembered the weight of the sword. He remembered the silence when it struck the villain. The way the power just stopped. He wasn't a hero who could breathe fire or punch down buildings. He wasn't a hero who could save everyone with a smile and a flash of light. He looked at the All Might poster on his wall. Then, he looked at the rusted, dirty sword depicted in the drawing on the page. If I can't be a symbol of peace, Izuku whispered, a new resolve hardening in his eyes. He closed the book. Then I'll be the one who destroys the things that threaten it. The grimoire pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The path to UA had opened. And Izuku Midoriya was going to walk it, dragging a sword of rusted iron every step of the way. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the Midoriya apartment, casting a soft, deceptive glow over a scene of domestic panic. Izuku Midoriya sat at his dining table, poking at a piece of grilled fish. He wasn't eating it. He was staring at the object hovering 3 inches above his left shoulder, the grimoire. It was ugly. That was the only word for it. In a world where support items were sleek, polished aluminum and neon lights, and quirks often manifested as colorful auras or biological mutations, this book was a relic of a darker, dirtier time. The leather cover was charred and peeling, resembling the skin of some ancient beast that had walked through hellfire. The 5-leaf clover on the front was barely visible under layers of grime, glowing with a faint, malevolent red pulse that seemed to sync with Izuku's own heartbeat. Izuku. Inko Midoriya whimpered from the kitchen sink. She was scrubbing a dish so hard she was liable to break it. Is it still there? Izuku sighed, rubbing his temples. Yes, Mom. It hasn't moved. It's floating, she whispered, her voice trembling. Books shouldn't float, Izuku. Unless it's a telekinesis quirk? But you said you aren't moving it? I'm not, Izuku said. He put his chopsticks down and turned to the book. Hey. Go away. Desummon. Disappear. The grimoire bobbed in the air, defiant. It drifted closer, nudging Izuku's cheek with its corner. The leather felt like warm, dry skin. It likes you, Inko said, turning pale. Oh, my poor baby. Your quirk is a haunted library. It's not haunted, Mom, Izuku said, though he wasn't entirely sure. He reached out and grabbed the book. It didn't resist. It felt solid, heavy, and undeniably real. He placed it on the table. Immediately it floated back up to his shoulder. See? Izuku groaned. It stuck to me. The police at the registry said it's likely a sentient support-type quirk, or a sub-variation of a summoner class. They put a known object manifestation on my provisional ID. He recalled the chaos of the previous night. The police station had been a circus. Officers touching the book, scanners trying to read it, and failing, the sword dissolving into ash when he let go of it. They had weighed him, measured him, and taken blood samples. The conclusion? Izuku Midoriya was still biologically quirkless. He had the extra toe joint. He had no plus alpha gene. And yet, he had the book. It's an out-of-place artifact, the specialist had muttered, looking at the X-rays of the book which showed absolutely nothing, just a void. Izuku finished his breakfast, or at least, he gave up on it. I have to go to school, Mom. Be careful. Inko rushed over, fussing with his collar. She eyed the grimoire warily. If it starts whispering to you, promise you'll call me? It doesn't talk, Mom. At least, not yet, he thought. Aldera Junior High was different that day. Usually, Izuku walked the halls like a ghost, invisible until someone decided to make him a target. Today, he was Moses parting the Red Sea. Students whispered as he passed. Eyes darted to his hip, where the grimoire was currently resting, held in place by an invisible tether. That's him. The guy who fought the sludge villain. Is that his quirk? A dirty book? I heard he cut the villain in half. I heard he summoned a demon. Izuku kept his head down, clutching the straps of his backpack. He tried to walk normally, but the grimoire had a habit of drifting. Occasionally, it would float behind him, or drift to his side. It was distracting. He slid the classroom door open. Silence. Every eye in Class 3 snapped to him. Even the teacher, who was usually indifferent, paused in the middle of writing equations on the board. And then there was Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo sat in his usual seat, feet up on the desk. But he wasn't yelling. He wasn't popping explosions in his palms. He was staring out the window, his jaw set so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. As Izuku walked to his desk, Bakugo didn't move. He didn't say Deku. He didn't trip him. He just ignored him with a terrifying intensity. Izuku sat down. The grimoire settled on the corner of his desk. All right, settle down, the teacher said, clearing his throat. Midoriya, please, keep your quirk under control. I can't really turn it off, sir, Izuku mumbled. Just don't summon any giant swords in class, the teacher sighed. We don't have the budget for new desks. The day dragged on. During lunch, Izuku hid on the roof. He needed to test this thing. He needed to understand what he was dealing with before the UA entrance exam, which was 10 months away. He sat on a bench and pulled the grimoire onto his lap. Okay, he whispered. Let's try reading you again. He opened the cover. The pages were yellowed, brittle parchment. The script was a chaotic scrawl of black ink, sharp and jagged. It looked less like writing and more like scratches made by a desperate prisoner. He turned the pages. Gibberish. Symbols that hurt his eyes if he stared too long. Then, he reached a bookmark, a strip of tattered red cloth. The page was black. A drawing of the sword he had used yesterday was etched in white ink. Demon Slayer sword. Below the name, text began to swirl and rearrange itself, translating into Japanese for his benefit. Status, dormant. Ability, severance and reflection. Weight, variable, fixed at maximum density. Requirements, physical might. Physical might. Izuku muttered. He looked around to make sure the roof was empty. Okay. Come out. He reached into the page. His hand passed through the paper like it was dipping into a pool of oil. He felt the cold, rough leather of the hilt. He gripped it. HRRGH. Immediately, his arms strained. He hadn't even pulled it out yet. The gravitational pull of the object inside the pocket dimension was immense. He planted his feet. He used both hands. Come. Out. With a heave that popped the joints in his shoulders, Izuku dragged the sword out of the book. Crack. The moment the full weight of the blade left the book, the concrete bench beneath Izuku shattered. Izuku collapsed, the sword slamming into the roof tiles, creating a spiderweb of fractures. Heavy. Izuku wheezed, his face pressed against the hilt. It's so heavy. It wasn't just heavy like a barbell. It felt like the sword had its own gravitational field. It was a slab of rusted iron that was taller than him, and as wide as a shield. He tried to lift it. His biceps screamed. His back felt like it was going to snap. He managed to lift the flat side of the blade maybe an inch off the ground before his grip failed, and it clanged back down. How did I swing this yesterday? Izuku panted, staring at the rusted metal. Adrenaline, he realized. Hysterical strength. When I saw Kaken dying, my body ignored its limits. If I try to swing this now, I'll tear every muscle in my torso. He looked at the sword. It was ugly, chipped, and covered in grime. But as he looked closer, he saw the faint anti-magic energy rolling off it like dry ice smoke. He reached out and touched the blade. It felt empty. So a voice boomed from the stairwell door. That is the source of your power, Izuku shrieked, letting go of the sword. The blade dissolved into black ash and swooshed back into the grimoire on the bench. He spun around, standing in the doorway. Wearing a yellow suit that looked 3 sizes too big, was the skeletal form of All Might. All Might? Izuku scrambled to his feet, bowing frantically. What are you doing at my school? You shouldn't be seen in that form. It's fine, I came in through the back. Stealth is a hero's virtue, All Might said, coughing into a handkerchief. He walked over, eyeing the grimoire. So, young Midoriya? I've been looking for you. We need to talk about your future. They relocated to a small park nearby, away from prying eyes. Izuku sat on a swing, the grimoire floating lazily beside him. All Might sat on a park bench, looking grave. Yesterday, All Might began, I witnessed something extraordinary. A boy with no power ran into a fire to save a life, while those with power stood and watched. Izuku looked down at his shoes. I couldn't watch him die. Exactly, All Might nodded. And that spirit is why I am here. I have a proposal for you. All Might leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. I am looking for a successor. Someone to inherit my will. Originally, I was looking for someone to inherit my quirk, one for all. Inherit a quirk? Izuku's mind raced. But that's impossible. Quirks are genetic. One for all is unique, All Might explained. He gave a brief, simplified history of the power passed down like a torch. I intended to find a worthy vessel and pass this torch to them, and yesterday, I thought I had found him in you. Izuku's heart hammered. All Might wanted to give him his power? The strongest power in the world? However, All Might raised a finger, stopping Izuku's train of thought. I have changed my mind. Izuku blinked. Oh. The disappointment was crushing. Don't look so sad. All Might laughed, coughing blood. I'm not rejecting you. Quite the opposite. I have decided not to give you one for all because you have already manifested a power that is uniquely yours. And frankly, it terrifies me. All Might pointed at the grimoire. That book. It is not a modern quirk. I have seen many powers in my life, young Midoriya. I have seen fire, ice, super strength, and reality warping. But that sword you pulled out? It erased the villain's quirk. It did, Izuku admitted. It didn't just cut him. It made him stop being sludge. Anti-quirk. All Might whispered the word like a curse. In a society built on quirks, a power that negates them is the ultimate disruption. If you had one for all, you would be a great hero. But with this power? You have the potential to be the natural enemy of every villain who relies on their gifts. All Might stood up and struck a pose, skinny version. I want to train you, Izuku Midoriya. Not to inherit my power, but to master your own. I want to help you forge that body into a vessel capable of wielding that sword. Because right now, All Might poked Izuku's skinny arm. You are a twig. If you swing that sword again, your arms will fly off with it. Izuku looked at his arms. Then at the grimoire. Then at All Might. You'll train me? I will. All Might gave a thumbs up. But be warned. I am a novice at teaching, and your power is a mystery even to me. We will be figuring this out together, and the first step is dealing with the fact that your sword weighs as much as a small car. Izuku stood up. The fire in his chest, the one that had almost died yesterday, was roaring now. I'll do it! Izuku shouted. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. All Might grinned. Then meet me tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Wear something comfortable. We're going to the beach. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Or, as the locals called it, the Trash Kingdom. Izuku stood at the edge of the sand, staring in horror. The beach wasn't visible. It was buried under mountains of garbage. Tires, refrigerators, broken cars, driftwood, plastic waste. It stretched for as far as the eye could see. This, All Might said, standing atop a pile of old refrigerators in his buff form, is your gym. It's a dump, Izuku said, covering his nose. The smell of rotting seaweed and rusted metal was overpowering. People have been illegally dumping here for years, All Might explained, dropping down. He deflated into his skinny form. Heroes these days want the glamorous jobs. Showy fights. Saving cats. They forget that hero work is also community service. Cleaning this beach is the first step. All Might pulled out a stack of papers. I call this the Aim to Pass, American Dream Plan. He handed the papers to Izuku. It was a schedule. A terrifying, minute-by-minute breakdown of Izuku's life for the next 10 months. Sleep, eating, studying, and training. Every calorie was accounted for. Every movement was scripted. But wait, Izuku said, scanning the document. This is just physical conditioning. Weightlifting. Running. Diet. Correct. All Might nodded. Midoriya, your quirk is an anomaly. Usually, quirks are like muscles. You use them, they get stronger. But your grimoire seems to be an inventory. The sword inside doesn't get lighter. You must get stronger. All Might walked over to a rusted truck tire half buried in the sand. That sword you summoned, how heavy was it? I couldn't lift it, Izuku admitted. Yesterday, on the roof. I dragged it out, and it broke a concrete bench. It felt like hundreds of kilos. Exactly, All Might said. To wield a weapon like that effectively, you don't just need strength. You need core strength. You need grip strength. You need a back constructed of steel cables. You cannot rely on a strength-enhancing quirk to lift it for you. You must become a monster of pure physical prowess. All Might pointed to the horizon. By the time the UA entrance exam arrives, you will have cleaned this entire section of the beach. You will move every piece of trash here by hand. No machines. Just you. Izuku looked at the mountains of garbage. It looked impossible. And All Might added, a sadistic glint in his eye, you will do it while attempting to keep the grimoire open. What? The book, All Might pointed to the floating tome. It seems to respond to your will. Keeping it open, keeping that connection active, seems to require mental focus. While you lift, you must focus on the book. Train your mind and your body simultaneously. Izuku swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Month 1, The Hell of Rust. The first month was agony. Pure, unadulterated agony. Izuku learned very quickly that he was weak. He couldn't move the refrigerators. He could barely move the tires. He spent the first week just dragging bags of lighter trash to the collection truck, his lungs burning like they were filled with acid. The grimoire made it worse. All Might insisted that Izuku tried to keep the book open while he worked. It was like trying to solve a math problem while running a marathon. Every time Izuku's concentration slipped, which was every time he lifted something heavy, the book would snap shut with a loud thwack that startled him, usually causing him to drop whatever he was holding on his foot. Concentrate, young Midoriya! All Might shouted from his perch on a Segway, sipping a smoothie. The connection to the weapon must be subconscious. It must be like breathing. It's hard. Izuku grunted, hauling a rusted bicycle frame over his shoulder. His muscles ached constantly. He would come home, collapse on the floor, and sleep until his alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. Inko was worried, but the sheer amount of food he was eating, and All Might's dietary plan, kept her cooking. By the end of the first month, the pain changed. It went from a sharp, tearing sensation to a dull, constant thrum. Izuku looked in the mirror. He wasn't ripped yet, but the baby fat was gone. His arms had definition, and on the last Sunday of the month, he tried to lift the sword. He went to a secluded corner of the beach. He opened the grimoire. He reached in. He pulled the Demon Slayer sword out. It crashed into the sand. Izuku gripped the hilt with both hands. He squatted, planting his heels. HNNNGH. The sword didn't leave the ground. But the tip shifted. Just an inch. Progress, Izuku whispered, sweat dripping from his nose. Month 3, the discovery. It was raining. A torrential downpour turned the beach into a mudslide. Izuku was shirtless, hauling a massive oak wardrobe that someone had inexplicably dumped on the beach. He was slipping in the mud, his boots struggling for traction. Don't drop it! All Might yelled. Engage your glutes. Izuku roared and heaved the wardrobe onto the truck bed. He collapsed into the mud, panting. Steam rose from his body. Good work, All Might said, offering him a towel. You're ahead of schedule. All Might, Izuku gasped, wiping mud from his eyes. I have a question. Ask away. The sword, Izuku said. It's anti-magic, right? It stops quirks. But what happens if I hit a quirk that isn't physical? Like fire? Or a laser? All Might rubbed his chin. A valid question. We have focused entirely on your muscles. We haven't tested the properties of the weapon since the sludge incident. All Might looked around. The beach was empty due to the rain. Summon it. Izuku stood up. He focused. The grimoire flipped open. By now, the motion was smoother. He reached in, grabbed the hilt, and pulled. It was still heavy. Incredibly heavy. But Izuku didn't fall. His legs, thickened by thousands of squats in the sand, held firm. His back, broadened by hauling appliances, took the load. He held the Demon Slayer sword. The tip dragged in the sand, but he was holding it upright. Okay, All Might said. He stepped back about 20 meters. I'm going to use a very, very small percentage of my power. Just wind pressure. I want you to try and block it. Block. All Might's punch? Izuku paled. I'll die. I said small percentage. Just a love tap. All Might pulled his fist back. Texas. Izuku gritted his teeth. He shifted his stance. He couldn't lift the sword high, so he angled it like a shield, bracing the flat of the blade against his shoulder. Smash! All Might punched the air. A condensed blast of air pressure, visible through the rain, rocketed toward Izuku. It tore a trench in the sand as it traveled. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut and braced for impact. The air blast hit the sword. Thwum. There was no impact. No recoil. Izuku opened his eyes. He hadn't moved an inch. The wind blast had hit the rusted blade and simply dispersed. It was as if the air pressure had been told it was no longer allowed to be pressure. The energy had been scattered into harmless breeze that ruffled Izuku's hair. Whoa, All Might breathed, lowering his fist. It didn't just block it. It negated the kinetic energy generated by the quirk factor. Izuku looked at the sword in awe. It ate the wind. This confirms it, All Might said, walking closer, his expression serious. Emitter types. That sword is the ultimate defense against them. If you can react fast enough to interpose that blade, you are immune to almost any ranged attack. But then, Izuku's knees buckled. He dropped the sword. Ow! Izuku grabbed his head. A sharp, piercing headache spiked behind his eyes. Midoriya? I'm okay, Izuku groaned. Just dizzy. It felt like, for a second, the sword got heavier. Not physically, but mentally. Interesting, All Might noted. Perhaps the act of negation drains your stamina? Or perhaps the grimoire feeds on your focus to perform the erasure. I need to get stronger, Izuku said, staring at the sword as it dissolved into ash. If I get tired after one block, I'm useless. Then get up. All Might barked. There are 3 more piles of tires waiting for you. Month 6, the transformation, summer hit. The heat was unbearable. The smell of the trash was now a biological weapon, but Izuku Midoriya was changing. He wasn't the scrawny kid anymore. He was a block of compressed muscle. His shirts were tight around the shoulders. His hands were covered in calluses, rough like sandpaper. He had started carrying the grimoire open all the time. He walked to school reading it, still gibberish, but he stared at it. He ate with it open. He brushed his teeth with it hovering. At school, the bullying had stopped completely. Not because Izuku fought back, but because he had become solid. One day, during PE, a classmate with a speed quirk accidentally crashed into Izuku while running laps. The classmate bounced off Izuku and fell over. Izuku didn't even stumble. He just stopped, offered a hand, and pulled the classmate up with terrifying ease. Bakugo watched from the sidelines, his eyes narrowing. He noticed the way Izuku moved now. It wasn't the skittish movement of a prey animal. It was the deliberate, heavy movement of something dangerous. He's not using the sword, Bakugo muttered. He's just strong. Back at the beach, the progress was visible. Half the coastline was clear. The golden sands were returning. Izuku was now doing sword swings. 1,000 swings a day. He couldn't swing it fast. It was a slow, grueling motion. Lift. Pause. Swing down. Pause. Lift. Every swing was a battle against gravity. Every repetition was a prayer to the god of gains. 998. Izuku grunted, sweat pouring down his bare chest. The demon slayer's sword cut through the humid air. 999. His veins bulged in his forearms. 1,000. He let the sword drop, embedding it deep into the sand. He collapsed next to it, chugging water from a gallon jug. Excellent form. All Might cheered. You're controlling the momentum now. You're not letting the weight throw you off balance. It's still slow, Izuku panted. If I fight someone fast, I can't hit them. You don't need to be fast with that sword, All Might advised. You just need to be in the right place. It's a shield and a hammer. You force them to come to you. And when they do, All Might punched his palm. You crush them. Month 10, the morning of the exam, the day arrived. February 26th. The morning of the UA High School entrance exam. All Might stood on the sidewalk overlooking the beach. He was waiting. The sun began to crest over the ocean, painting the water in hues of orange and purple. And there, standing atop the final, massive pile of trash that had been moved to the collection point, was Izuku Midoriya. But the beach was gone. Or rather, the trash was gone. In its place was a pristine, golden coastline. The waves lapped gently against the shore. Birds were singing. It was beautiful. Izuku stood on top of a mountain of garbage bags and scrap metal, screaming at the sky. Aowa! He was shirtless. And he was ripped. Not the bulky, bodybuilder muscle of All Might. This was functional, condensed warrior muscle. He looked like he had been carved out of wood and stone. Scars from cuts and scrapes littered his arms and torso, badges of honor from the jagged metal he had conquered. The grimoire floated beside him, open, the pages fluttering in the ocean breeze. Izuku jumped down from the pile, landing with a heavy thud in the sand. He didn't wobble. He walked over to All Might. I did it, Izuku said. His voice was deeper, steadier. I cleaned it all. All Might looked at the boy. Tears streamed down the hero's sunken face. You did more than that, kid, All Might sniffed. You went beyond. Plus ultra. All Might reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bento box. I don't have a hair to give you, All Might joked, wiping his eyes. But I made you lunch. High protein, Izuku smiled. It was the brightest smile he had worn in years. Thank you, All Might. Now, All Might said, placing a hand on Izuku's rock-hard shoulder. Summon it. Izuku nodded. His eyes sharpened. The grimoire flashed with red light. He reached in. He grabbed the handle. Zip. He pulled the Demon Slayer sword out in one fluid motion. He didn't struggle. He didn't grunt. He held the massive, rusted blade in one hand, resting it on his shoulder casually. The tip hovered inches above the ground. It still weighed a ton. He could feel the strain in his wrists, the pull on his spine. But he could hold it. He could fight with it. Go, All Might said, pointing toward the city. Go to the exam. And show them that you don't need a quirk to be a hero. Show them the power of pure effort. Izuku gripped the sword tight. The anti-magic energy swirled around him, reacting to his confidence. For a fleeting second, the black energy flared from his back, looking almost like a singular, broken wing. Yes, sir! Izuku let the sword vanish, grabbed his uniform shirt from a nearby railing, and threw it on. He grabbed his backpack and began to run. He didn't run with the light, skipping step of a child. He ran with the heavy, driving stride of a locomotive. The ground seemed to shake slightly with each impact. As he ran toward UA, toward his future, Izuku Midoriya touched the grimoire at his hip. I have no magic, he thought. I have no fire. I have no flight. He looked at his scarred hands. I just have this rusted sword and the body I built to wield it. And that's all I need. The massive glass and steel structure of UA High School reflected the morning sun, casting a blinding, hopeful glare over the hundreds of students marching toward its gates. To the average passerby, it was a school. To the teenagers walking its path, it was Olympus. It was the gateway to the heavens. Izuku Midoriya stood at the base of the long pathway, his red sneakers planted firmly on the pavement. He was different. 10 months ago, he would have stood here with his shoulders hunched, his knees knocking together, vibrating with a mix of neurosis and terror. He would have looked like a strong breeze could blow him over. Today, he stood like a statue. The oversized middle school uniform that used to hang off his frame now strained against his shoulders and chest. The buttons on his blazer looked like they were holding back a flood. His neck, once a twig, was thick with muscle. His jawline had sharpened, no longer hidden by baby fat but carved by grit and exhaustion. And then, there was the book. Hovering just off his left hip, tethered by an invisible gravitational lock, was the grimoire. It was as dirty and tattered as ever, the 5-leaf clover on the cover pulsating with a dull, rhythmic crimson light. It didn't bob up and down cheerfully. It hung heavy in the air, exuding a silent pressure that made students give Izuku a wide berth. This is it, Izuku whispered to himself. He reached down and touched the cover of the grimoire. It felt warm, like a living thing sleeping. Get out of my way, Deku. The voice was low, lacking its usual explosive volume, but carrying twice the menace. Katsuki Bakugo walked past him, hands in his pockets. He didn't shove Izuku. He didn't spark his palms. He just walked with the predator's gait he had perfected. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't jump. He simply turned his head. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. Bakugo paused. He glanced back, his red eyes narrowing as they swept over Izuku's transformed physique and the floating book. For a moment, the air between them crackled, not with explosions, but with unspoken history. Don't die, Bakugo grunted, turning back around. It'd be a waste of a good punching bag. As Bakugo walked away, Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He didn't yell. That's progress? Izuku took his first step toward the gate. But his foot caught on an uneven lip of concrete. It was a classic Midoriya moment. All the muscle in the world couldn't cure clumsy. He pitched forward. Gravity took hold. He braced himself for the impact, expecting to taste asphalt before the exam even started. But he never hit the ground. He stopped in midair, floating weightlessly. Are you okay? A bubbly voice floated into his ear. Izuku looked up to see a girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair smiling at him. Her hand was pressed against his backpack. It's bad luck to trip on the entrance exam, she chirped. She tapped her fingertips together, and Izuku dropped the remaining few inches to the ground. He landed solidly, his heavy boots making a thud. Thanks, Izuku stammered, dusting off his blazer. The girl blinked, her eyes drifting from his face to the side. Whoa! Is that a book? It's floating, she pointed at the grimoire. Oh, this? Izuku instinctively covered it with his hand. Yeah. It's sort of my quirk. It follows me around. That's so cool. It looks super old. Like a spell book. She grinned, pumping a fist in the air. I'm Ochiko Uraraka. Let's do our best, okay? I'm Izuku Midoriya, he replied, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. Andy, yeah? Let's do our best. She waved and ran off toward the entrance. Izuku watched her go, a sense of wonder washing over him. I talked to a girl, he thought, amazed. And I didn't pass out. He looked at the grimoire. You didn't scare her off. Good job. The grimoire offered no response, merely floating silently as Izuku squared his shoulders and marched into the arena of his destiny. The written exam was a battlefield of a different kind. The lecture hall was vast, filled with rows of tiered seating. The silence was punctuated only by the scratching of pencils and the occasional nervous cough. For Izuku, this was the easy part. For years, while other kids were practicing their quirks in the park, Izuku had been studying. He had analyzed hero laws, physics, quirk theory, and history. His notebooks, all 13 volumes before Bakugo burned the last one, were etched into his memory. He breezed through the questions. Question 45. Calculate the collateral damage coefficient of a gigantification quirk in an urban density zone B. Easy, Izuku thought, his pencil flying across the page. Volume determines displacement. Force equals mass times acceleration. Factor in the structural integrity of standard concrete. He finished with time to spare. He looked around. Bakugo was writing furiously, looking like he wanted to murder the paper. Other students looked like they were on the verge of tears. Izuku placed his pencil down. He looked at the grimoire, which was hovering quietly under his desk, out of sight. The written test proves I have the mind, he thought, clenching his fist under the table. Now comes the body. Everybody say hey. President Mick's voice blasted through the auditorium, loud enough to rattle teeth. The hero voice quirk was impressive, but the response from the crowd of nervous examinees was dead silence. Tough crowd, Mike shrugged, adjusting his sunglasses. All right, listeners. Here's the deal for the practical exam. The screen behind him lit up, displaying a digital layout of a city. You'll be conducting 10-minute mock urban battles. You can bring whatever gear you want, but you're heading to your assigned battle centers after this. Izuku looked at his exam ticket. Battle Center B. He glanced to his right. Bakugo was holding a card that said Battle Center A. Bakugo scowled. Looks like they split us up so we don't kill each other. Or so we don't work together, Izuku whispered. Don't look at me, Deku! Bakugo snapped, though he kept his voice down. I don't need your help. President Mike continued, explaining the 3 types of villain bots. The 1-pointer, easy, the 2-pointer, medium, and the 3-pointer, hard. Your goal is to rack up points by destroying these targets. Use your quirks to disable or destroy them. Suddenly, a hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. Sir! I have a question. A tall boy with glasses and a severe haircut stood up, pointing rigidly at the screen. Spotlight hit him instantly. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a mistake, it is highly shameful for a top-tier institution like UA. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. The boy then spun around and pointed a finger directly at Izuku. And you! The one with the curly hair and the floating debris. Izuku froze. The entire auditorium turned to look at him. You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. And that book hovering next to you. If that is unauthorized equipment, you should leave immediately. Izuku felt the blood drain from his face. The floating debris comment stung, but the accusation of cheating was worse. It's not equipment, Izuku said, his voice quiet but carrying in the silence. He stood up, his chair scraping the floor. It's my quirk. I can't turn it off. The boy with glasses paused, adjusting his frames. He seemed to assess the dirty, ominous book floating by Izuku's hip. A permanent activation type? The boy muttered, "My apologies. I was unaware." He bowed stiffly and sat down. Okay. Present Mike interjected, regaining control. Thanks for the segue. Examinee 7111. The fourth robot is a zero-pointer. It's an obstacle. Think of it like a thwomp in a video game. There's no point in fighting it, so just run away. Run away, Izuku noted. Avoiding danger is also a hero skill. Battle Center B. It was a city. A literal, full-scale city. Izuku stood before the massive gates, staring up at the skyscrapers that loomed over the fake streets. The scale of UA's resources was terrifying. He wore a simple green tracksuit he had bought for cheap. It was sleeveless, exposing his muscular arms, scarred from months of hauling rusted metal at Dagoba Beach. He wore heavy combat boots with steel toes, and on his right hip, he wore a custom-made thick leather belt with a magnetic clip, not for the sword, but to give the grimoire a place to rest if it wanted to, though it preferred to float. Around him, other examinees were stretching, checking their gear, and psyching themselves up. "Look at that guy," someone whispered. "He's not wearing a costume. Just gym clothes. Is he the one with the floating book? He looks kinda intense. Look at his arms." Izuku ignored them. He was breathing in a 4-7-8 rhythm, calming his heart rate. Recall the training, he told himself. The sand. The weight. The balance. He closed his eyes. He could feel the connection to the pocket dimension inside the book. The Demon Slayer sword was there, waiting in the void. "Excuse me?" Izuku opened his eyes. It was the boy with glasses from the auditorium. He was wearing a sleek, armored tracksuit with engines on his calves. "I wanted to apologize again for my outburst earlier," the boy said stiffly. "I am Tenya Ida." "Oh, it's fine," Izuku waved his hands. "I'm Izuku Midoriya. I mutter when I'm nervous. I'll try to keep it down." Ida looked at Izuku, analyzing him. "You seem remarkably calm now, Midoriya. You have the air of a warrior preparing for battle. I may have misjudged you." Before Izuku could respond, the lights on the massive gate turned green. "Start!" President Mick's voice screamed from the observation towers. "What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! Go! Go!" The crowd hesitated for a fraction of a second, confused. But Izuku moved. His body reacted before his brain did. It was the Pavlovian response drilled into him by All Might. When the signal goes, you move. He launched himself forward. His boots slammed into the pavement. He wasn't as fast as a speedster, but his stride was powerful, eating up the ground. "He's fast!" someone yelled. The rest of the pack surged forward behind him. Izuku sprinted down the main street. He needed a target. He needed points. Right turn. Alleyway. He drifted around a corner and skidded to a halt. Blocking the path was a one-pointer. It was a wheeled robot, about the size of a car, with a single red eye and grasping claws. Target acquired, the robot beeped. Kill. It lunged forward, moving surprisingly fast. Izuku planted his feet. He took a deep breath. "Come!" His hand shot to the grimoire. The book flipped open violently, pages blurring. He reached into the void. The air pressure dropped. Red sparks danced. With a grunt of exertion, Izuku pulled. Clang! The Demon Slayer's sword smashed onto the pavement as he dragged it out. The sheer weight of the rusted iron cracked the asphalt beneath his feet. The one-pointer was 3 meters away. Izuku didn't have time to lift the sword high. He didn't have time for a perfect kendo stance. He gripped the hilt with both hands, twisted his hips, and swung the massive slab of metal sideways like a baseball bat. Ha! The rusted blade met the robot's chassis. There was no screech of tearing metal. There was just a dull thump followed by a static hiss. The sword didn't cut the robot in half. It smashed into the side, crumpling the metal armor. But the moment the anti-magic touched the robot, the red eye went dark. The robot's momentum carried it forward, but it was dead. It crashed into the wall next to Izuku, sliding to a halt, completely inert. 1 point, Izuku panted, adjusting his grip. He looked at the sword. It was heavy. So incredibly heavy. Running with this thing was going to be a nightmare. Out of the way, a laser beam shot past Izuku's ear. A blond boy with a sparkling belt, Oyama, fired a naval laser, blasting a two-pointer that had appeared on the roof. Merci! Aoyama winked and ran past. Izuku gritted his teeth. Range. I have no range. He grabbed the handle of the sword and hefted it onto his shoulder. The metal bit into his trapezius muscle. He started to run again. Thud. 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 Every step was a labor. He was carrying a person's weight in iron. He turned another corner. A three-pointer, a massive, tank-treaded scorpion robot, burst through a wall. Target! Izuku charged. But the robot fired a barrage of rubber missiles. Crap! Izuku swung the sword in front of him, planting the tip in the ground to use it as a shield. Bam! 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 The missiles hit the broad side of the sword and bounced off harmlessly. But the impact jarred Izuku's bones. I can't just block. He waited for a lull in the fire. He abandoned the shield, grabbed the hilt, and charged. The robot raised a claw to crush him. Izuku slid. He dropped to his knees, the momentum carrying him under the robot's guard on the smooth concrete. As he slid past the treads, he thrust the sword upward. The tip pierced the underbelly of the robot. Zzrt. The machine seized. Its lights died. It collapsed with a groan of hydraulics. 4 points, Izuku wheezed, scrambling out from under the chassis before it fully settled. He stood up, wiping sweat from his eyes. He checked the time on a public clock. 4 minutes left. Only 4 points. It wasn't enough. Around him, explosions rocked the city. Students with flashy, destructive quirks were racking up scores in the 30s and 40s. He could hear Bakugo in the distance, screaming die, followed by massive detonations. Izuku was too slow. The sword was too heavy. He had to drag it, set his stance, and swing. By the time he was ready, someone else had usually sniped the target. Think, Izuku, think! He muttered, jogging down a side street. I don't need to destroy them completely. The anti-magic shuts them down on contact. I don't need heavy swings. I need touches. He rounded a corner and saw a group of two-pointers surrounding a student, a boy with a tail, Ojiro. Ojiro was fighting well, but he was outnumbered. Help! Ojiro grunted, dodging a claw. Izuku didn't hesitate. But instead of winding up for a smash, he changed his grip. He choked up on the blade, holding the unsharpened rusted metal halfway up the sword, turning it into a short spear. He charged. Hey! Izuku yelled. The robots turned. Izuku thrust the tip of the sword into the exposed joint of the nearest robot. A light tap. Zap. The robot died instantly. He spun, using the momentum to slap the flat of the blade against the second robot's sensor array. Zap. Down. The third robot lunged. Izuku didn't have time to swing. He simply shouldered the robot, pressing the grimoire itself against the metal chassis. Nothing happened. Crap! The book isn't the weapon, the sword is. The robot backhanded him. Gah! Izuku flew backward, skidding on the pavement. His skin scraped against the concrete. Midoriya! Ojiro yelled, tail-whipping the robot that hit him. Izuku scrambled up. He grabbed the sword lying nearby. I'm fine. He rushed back in, driving the sword into the final robot's power core. It shut down. Thanks, man, Ojiro panted. That sword is terrifyingly effective. It just kills them instantly. Yeah, Izuku breathed, clutching his ribs. But it's heavy. We should split up, get more points, Ojiro said. Good luck. Izuku checked his score. Maybe 10 points? 12? It was disastrous. He was failing. After 10 months of hell, after cleaning the entire beach, he was going to fail because he was too slow. I need more. I need a swarm. He ran toward the center of the city, dragging the sword, sparks flying from the tip dragging on the ground. 2 minutes left. He found a cluster of one-pointers. He went to work. Slash. Die. Thrust. Die. Block. Counter. Die. He was finding a rhythm. The anti-magic effect was absolute. It didn't matter how much armor they had. If the sword connected, the circuitry, or whatever magical science animated them, ceased to function. He realized he was essentially wielding an EMP on a stick. He was up to 28 points. Maybe enough to scrape by. And then, the ground jumped. Boom. It wasn't an explosion. It was a footstep. Izuku stumbled, using the sword to steady himself. The other students froze. From behind the tallest skyscrapers, a shadow eclipsed the sun. It was colossal. The zero-pointer. It was a monstrosity of green metal, towering over the buildings. It had to be 20 stories tall. Its hand crashed through a building, sending tons of concrete raining down onto the street. What is that? A student screamed. It's the zero-pointer. Run! The panic was instantaneous. The students, who had been confident heroes moments ago, turned into a stampede of terrified children. They ran past Izuku, shoving him aside. Move! Get out of the way! It's huge! Why would they even build that? Izuku stood frozen. The sheer scale of the thing paralyzed him. It was a natural disaster given form. Run, his brain screamed. It's worth 0 points. There is no tactical advantage to fighting it. All Might said to clean the beach, not fight God. He took a step back. The sword felt heavier than ever. Oh wow! The cry was faint, buried under the rumble of collapsing buildings and the screams of the fleeing students. But Izuku heard it. He stopped. He turned his head. In the middle of the ruined street, directly in the path of the zero-pointer, a girl was trapped. It was Uraraka. She was pinned under a massive slab of concrete debris that had fallen from the building the robot smashed. She was struggling, her face pale with pain, trying to lift the rock, but she was exhausted. The zero-pointer loomed over her. Its massive tread was grinding forward. In 10 seconds she would be crushed. The other students were gone. Running. I can't. Uraraka whimpered, tears squeezing out of her eyes. Izuku looked at the robot. He looked at Uraraka. My body moved before I could think. It happened again. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, white-hot clarity. Izuku Midoriya didn't run away. He ran toward the death machine. Smash! He roared, sprinting directly at the zero-pointer. He reached Uraraka. The slab was heavy, concrete and rebar. Midoriya? Uraraka gasped. Izuku didn't waste breath. He jammed the tip of the Demon Slayer's sword under the slab. Using the rock as a fulcrum and the sword as a lever, he pulled down on the hilt with everything he had. HNNNNG, the slab lifted. Anti-magic didn't cancel gravity, but the sword was unbreakable. Crawl out! Uraraka scrambled free, clutching her ankle. My leg, it's twisted. The shadow of the zero-pointer darkened completely over them. The massive metal hand was descending to sweep the street clean. Can you walk? Izuku yelled. I don't think so, she cried. Izuku looked up. The hand was coming down. It was too big to block. If he tried to shield them, the sheer mass would drive them into the pavement like nails. I can't defend. I have to attack. But it was too big. Where was the weak point? Robots run on power. Power comes from the core. He scanned the Titan. There, on its neck, protected by a glass casing, lights pulsed. The central processor. It was 60 meters in the air. Izuku looked at the sword. He looked at the robot's arm, which was currently smashing into the ground 10 meters to his left. Hold on, Izuku said to Uraraka. What? Izuku didn't answer. He turned and sprinted toward the robot's arm. He wasn't All Might. He couldn't jump a building in a single bound. He couldn't fly, but he had spent 10 months climbing mountains of trash. He had grip strength that could crush apples. Izuku leaped onto the robot's wrist as it rested on the ground. Climb! He began to run up the robot's arm. It was crazy. The robot was moving, shifting. Izuku dug his boots into the panel gaps. He used the sword like an ice pick, stabbing it into the metal armor to anchor himself, then hauling himself up. Stab. Pull. Step. Stab. Pull. Step. The grimoire floated beside him, keeping pace effortlessly, the pages fluttering in the wind. The zero-pointer sensed the intruder. It shook its arm. Whoa! Izuku lost his footing. He dangled 60 feet in the air, holding on by one hand gripping the hilt of the sword, which was embedded in the robot's elbow. Don't let go! He swung his legs, found purchase on a hydraulic piston, and vaulted upward. He was a speck of green on a mountain of metal. He reached the shoulder. The head was right there. The robot's red eyes swiveled toward him. Lasers charged in its face. Target pest. Izuku stood on the shoulder joint. The wind whipped his hair. He stared into the mechanical eyes of the beast. He gripped the demon slayer's sword with both hands. The veins in his neck bulged. The anti-magic energy flared, coating the blade in a thick, black aura. I am not a pest, Izuku snarled. He didn't swing at the face. He leaped from the shoulder, aiming for the neck connection, the spine. I am a hero! Izuku drove the sword downward. Black meteorite. He hadn't named the move yet, but it felt right. The rusted blade plunged deep into the bundle of thick cables and machinery at the base of the robot's neck. Zzzzzzzzzztt. The sound was deafening. It was the sound of a power plant dying. The anti-magic poured into the zero-pointer. It didn't just cut the cables. It nullified the energy flowing through them. The connection between the brain and the body was severed instantly. The charging lasers in the eyes fizzled and died. The hum of the massive engines cut out. The silence returned. The zero-pointer, frozen in mid-step, began to tip backward. Izuku yanked the sword free. He was falling now. Gravity, the one thing he couldn't cut, took hold. Oh no, he was falling from 20 stories up. He had no landing strategy. He flailed, clutching the heavy sword. I'm gonna die. I saved her, but I'm gonna splat. Slap! Suddenly he stopped. He hovered 3 feet above the ground. Uraraka, face pale and nauseous, was leaning against a piece of rubble. She had her hands pressed together in a triangle shape. Release! She gagged. Izuku dropped the last 3 feet, landing in a heap. The sword clattered next to him. Time's up! President Mick's siren wailed across the city. The exam was over. Izuku lay on his back, staring at the sky. His arms were trembling uncontrollably. His lungs felt like they were bleeding. I did it, he thought hazily. I beat the giant. Then, reality set in. But, it was worth 0 points. He sat up, panic gripping his chest. I have, maybe 28 points. That's not enough. The average cutoff is usually 40 or 50. I wasted the last 2 minutes on a zero-pointer. Tears pricked his eyes. He had failed. After everything, he had failed. Here, eat some gummies. An elderly woman in a lab coat was walking through the crowd. It was Recovery Girl. Oh dear, look at you, she said, waddling up to Izuku. Scraped up, exhausted. And what is this heavy thing? She tapped the sword with her cane. It's my quirk, Izuku croaked. He let go of the handle, and the sword vanished into the grimoire. Fascinating, she muttered. She kissed him on the forehead. Warmth spread through his body. The scrapes healed. The exhaustion remained, but the pain faded. That boy. Izuku looked up. A crowd of students had gathered. They weren't looking at him with mockery anymore. Did you see that? One guy whispered. He climbed the zero-pointer. He didn't use a blast or super strength. He just turned it off. That sword, what is he? Ida was standing near the back of the group. He was staring at Izuku, his glasses reflecting the fallen form of the giant robot. He jumped in to save that girl without hesitation, Ida thought, clenching his fists. While I ran away to ensure my own score. I have completely misjudged the nature of this test. Ida looked at his own high score, then at Izuku, who was looking at the ground in despair. He thinks he failed, Ida realized. But he showed more heroism than any of us. 1 week later, the Midoriya apartment was quiet. Izuku lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He was doing lifting exercises with a dumbbell, but his heart wasn't in it. The grimoire sat on his desk. It hadn't moved in days. It seemed to sense his mood. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered to the book. I got you, but I couldn't get us in. He had told his mom he probably failed. The dinner table had been a silent affair for a week. Izuku! It's here! Inko burst into the room, holding a white envelope. The letter from UA. Izuku sat up. He took the envelope. It felt heavy. He went to his desk. He sat down. I'll do this alone, Mom. She nodded, looking terrified, and closed the door. Izuku took a breath. He opened the envelope. A metal disc slid out. It projected a hologram onto the wall. I am here as a projection. All Might? Izuku gasped. The hero was in his buff form, wearing a yellow suit. Young Midoriya. You have been waiting. And I am here to deliver the results. All Might cleared his throat. First, the written exam. You passed with flying colors. A perfect score on the law section. Very impressive nerdiness. Izuku smiled weakly. Now, the practical. You defeated 28 points worth of villains. Izuku's head dropped. 28. It's too low. The cutoff is usually 40. 28 points is a low score, All Might admitted, his voice serious. Usually, this would be a failure. Izuku closed his eyes. However, All Might slammed his hand on the desk in the video. Do you think a hero course would reject someone who saves lives? What kind of hero ignores a person in danger to smack a robot? The video changed. It showed a clip of Uraraka sitting in a negotiation room. Please! She was pleading with present mic. Can I give some of my points to the boy with the book? He saved me. He wasted his time on the giant robot because of me. He's going to fail because of me. Izuku's eyes widened. Uraraka, you inspired others, young Midoriya. All Might shouted. But you don't need her points. Because Yue has a secret criteria, the screen flashed. Rescue points, for risking your own safety to save another against a massive threat. And for disabling the threat with minimal collateral damage, a number appeared on the screen. Izuku Midoriya, 60 rescue points. Total score, 88 points. Izuku stopped breathing. You passed. All Might pointed at the camera. You crushed it. The entrance exam was a test of heart as much as power. And your heart, coupled with that strange, heavy sword, proved itself. The hologram zoomed in on All Might's face. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. He looked at the grimoire. The 5-leaf clover seemed to glow a little brighter, a deep, victorious crimson. Izuku put his head in his hands. And for the first time in a week, he cried. But these weren't tears of despair. I did it, he choked out. He reached out and patted the rough leather cover of the book. We did it. The uniform felt different. That was the first thought Izuku Midoriya had as he stood in front of the full-length mirror in his bedroom. The standard gray blazer with the teal stripes, the red tie, the dark trousers. It wasn't just cloth. It was armor. It was a flag. It was the skin of a hero. For years he had looked at this uniform on other people with a burning, painful envy. Now, the weight of it settled on his shoulders, and it felt heavier than the trash at Tagoba Beach. Izuku? Inko's voice came from the hallway. Are you ready? You're going to be late. Coming, Mom. Izuku adjusted his collar. He looked down at his hip. There, strapped to his belt, was a new addition to his wardrobe. Over the past week, after receiving his acceptance letter, Izuku had realized a logistical problem. The grimoire followed him. It floated. It drifted. It knocked into things. In a crowded train or a classroom, a floating book radiating ominous energy was a nuisance. So, he had visited a hardware store and, with some clumsy sewing skills learned from his mother, fashioned a holster. It was a thick, leather pouch attached to a heavy-duty tactical belt. Okay, Izuku whispered to the floating book. Get in. The grimoire hovered stubbornly at eye level, the 5-leaf clover pulsing with a faint, crimson light. It seemed to be inspecting his tie. We talked about this, Izuku hissed. School rules. No floating in the hallways. Get in the bag. He grabbed the book. It vibrated, resisting for a second like a cat refusing a carrier, before the anti-gravity effect disengaged. It dropped into the leather pouch with a heavy thump. Izuku cinched the strap tight. The weight hit his hips immediately. It was like wearing a lead brick. But after 10 months of hell training with All Might, a lead brick was nothing. He grabbed his yellow backpack and stepped out of his room. Inko was waiting by the door. Her eyes welled up instantly. My baby, she sniffled, clutching a tissue. You look so grown up. You're high school. I still can't believe it. I'll do my best, Mom. Izuku smiled. It wasn't the trembling, uncertain smile of his middle school days. It was firmer. I'm off. Be careful with the thing. She pointed at his hip. I will. As he walked to the train station, Izuku felt the gazes. The Yui uniform was a magnet. Adults nodded respectfully. Middle schoolers stared in awe. For the first time in his life, the stares weren't looking down on him. They were looking up. I made it, he thought, gripping the strap of his bag. But this is just the starting line. Now I have to survive. Yui High School. Class 1A. The door was enormous. Izuku stood before the towering barrier labeled 1A. It was easily 4 meters tall. Is it this big for students with gigantification quirks? He wondered, his analyst brain kicking in. Or is it just intimidation tactics? He took a deep breath. He could hear voices inside. Please let it be a normal class. Please don't let the scary people be here. He slid the door open. Remove your foot from that desk immediately. Ha! Who do you think you are, 4 Eyes? Izuku froze. Standing at the front of the room was Tenya Ida, the stiff, glasses-wearing boy from the entrance exam. He was chopping his hand through the air robotically. Sitting at the desk, feet propped up with supreme arrogance, was Katsuki Bakugo. It is disrespectful to the Yui upperclassmen who used this desk before you. Ida scolded. Upperclassmen? Bakugo sneered. What are you, a hall monitor? Where are you from, you extra? I am from semi-private academy. My name is Tenya Ida. Sama? So you're a damn elite, Bakugo grinned, a dark shadow crossing his face. I'll have fun crushing you. Crushing me? Ida recoiled in horror. Are you truly aiming to be a hero? Izuku groaned internally. The 2 scariest people are in my class. He tried to sneak in, but Ida's sensors were too sharp. The tall boy spun around. Ah. You are. The class went silent. Bakugo's head snapped toward the door. His eyes narrowed into slits when he saw Izuku. Midoriya, Ida marched over. Good morning. I am Tenya Ida. I heard, Izuku stammered. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Midoriya. Ida adjusted his glasses, his expression serious. I must apologize. During the entrance exam, I misjudged you. I thought you were merely a muttering distraction, but you perceived the true nature of the test, the rescue points, while I was blinded by the superficial objective. I hate to admit it, but you are the better student. Oh no, I didn't figure anything out. Izuku waved his hands frantically. My body moved. Hey! It's the plain-looking boy. A bubbly face popped up behind Izuku. It was Achiko Uraraka. You passed. She cheered, beaming. I was so worried. Your rescue points must have been huge. That punch on the giant robot was amazing. Or, well, the stab. She mimicked a stabbing motion. Yeah, Izuku turned red. Being surrounded by bright, loud, talented people was overwhelming. I wonder what kind of teacher we'll have. Uraraka chirped. I hope they're nice. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. Izuku looked down. Outside the door, lying in a yellow sleeping bag like a metamorphic caterpillar, was a man. He had long, messy black hair, tired eyes, and stubble that suggested he hadn't slept in 3 days. He was sucking on a jelly pouch. This is the hero course, the man mumbled, standing up and unzipping the sleeping bag in one fluid motion. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. He stepped into the room. He wore all black and a strange, gray scarf wrapped around his neck. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you, the class gasped. Homeroom teacher? He looks so tired, someone whispered. Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue gym uniforms. Put these on and meet me on the grounds, he said, tossing them onto the front desk. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The locker room. The boys' locker room was a flurry of activity. A test on the first day. A boy with spiky red hair asked, pulling on his shirt. Yui really doesn't mess around. I'm Eijiro Kurishima, by the way. My quirk is hardening. I'm Denki Kaminari, said a blond boy with a black lightning bolt streak in his hair. I do electricity. Hey, Midoriya, right? Izuku looked up from tying his shoes. Why yes? That thing on your hip. Kaminari pointed to the leather pouch Izuku had placed on the bench. Is that your quirk? The exam rumors said you had a magic book. Yeah, Izuku nodded. It's called a grimoire. It summons swords. Swords? Minoru Mineta, a small boy with grape-like balls on his head, trembled. That sounds dangerous. Is it cursed? It looks cursed. It's not cursed, Izuku lied. He didn't actually know. It's just heavy. He picked up the pouch. He couldn't leave it in the locker. The police registry was specific. The artifact must remain within 5 meters of the user at all times or it risks unstable teleportation. Can you fight without it? A boy with elbows like tape dispensers, Ciro, asked. Izuku paused. He looked at his arms. The gym uniform was sleeveless, exposing the definition of his muscles. The scars from the beach cleanup, small nicks from rusted metal, were faint silver lines against his skin. I had to learn to, Izuku said quietly. The sword is really heavy. If I wasn't strong enough to lift it, it wouldn't matter if I summoned it. Man, you look ripped though, Kirishima grinned, slapping Izuku on the back. Very manly. I respect a guy who builds his body. Bakugo slammed his locker shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Don't get cocky, Deku, Bakugo growled, walking past them. Muscles don't mean crap if you can't hit anything. The room went quiet. You two know each other? Kirishima whispered. Yeah, Izuku sighed, strapping the grimoire to his waist. Since we were kids. Pea grounds. The sun was high and bright. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and impending doom. Class 1A stood in a cluster, looking at Aizawa. A quirk apprehension test? The class shouted in unison. But what about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting? Uraraka asked. If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa said, his voice flat. UA's selling point is freedom. And that applies to the teachers as well. He turned to face them, his eyes dark and unimpressed. Softball throw. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Upper body training. Seated toe touch. Sit-ups. You did these in middle school, right? But you were forbidden from using your quirks. Aizawa held up a ball. The country is still stuck on the old way of calculating averages. It's not rational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. He tossed the ball to Bakugo. Bakugo, you finished first in the entrance exam. In middle school, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa ordered. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo walked to the circle. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. Don't hold back, huh? He wound up. Die-eye. Boom. A massive explosion propelled the ball. It shot into the sky like a mortar shell, leaving a trail of smoke. Aizawa held up a device. It beeped. He showed the screen to the class. 705.2 meters. Whoa! Kaminari shouted. 700 meters? That's insane. This looks like fun. Mina Ashido cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want? Awesome. Ciro added. The atmosphere lightened. The students were excited. They were finally getting to show off. Aizawa lowered the device. His expression didn't change, but the air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Fun? He repeated. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? He smiled. It was a distorted, terrifying expression that didn't reach his eyes. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential. He brushed his hair back. And will be punished with immediate expulsion. The silence was absolute. Expulsion? Uraraka shrieked. But it's the first day. That's not fair. Natural disasters aren't fair, Aizawa countered. Power-hungry villains aren't fair. Catastrophic accidents aren't fair. Heroes are the ones who correct that unfairness. If you wanted to go hang out with your friends at Mickey D's after school, you're in the wrong place. For the next 3 years, Yui will run you through the ringer. Plus ultra, he beckoned with a finger. Come on. The real thing starts now. Izuku swallowed hard. His hand drifted to the pouch on his hip. Last place gets expelled. He looked around. Everyone here had amazing powers. Engines. Gravity control. Lasers. Explosions. Creation. I have a sword, Izuku thought. A sword that weighs a ton. I can't use it to run faster. I can't use it to jump higher. I can only use it for strength, and, maybe the throw. He clenched his fist. I have to rely on the body All Might help me build. I have to survive the physical tests and bet everything on the ones where I can use the grimoire. Test 1, 50-meter dash. On your mark. Get set, bang. Ida and Tsuyu Ajiri launched off the line. Ida was a blur. His engines roared. 3.04 seconds. Like a fish in water, Ajiri commented, landing in 5.58 seconds. Izuku watched nervously. Ida is untouchable in speed. Next group. Izuku stepped up to the line. He was racing against Bakugo. Bakugo looked at him. Don't cry when you lose, Deku. Start. Bakugo blasted backward, using his explosions as propulsion. He flew across the track. 4.13 seconds. Izuku ran. He didn't use the sword. He just sprinted. He dug his boots into the track, pumping his arms. Every squat, every lunge, every mile running through the sand at Dagoba Beach fueled his legs. He crossed the line. 5.51 seconds. Whoa, Kirishima said. Midoriya is pretty fast for a guy with no speed quirk. Izuku panted, hands on his knees. Better than middle school. Much better. But against quirks? It's average. He was in the middle of the pack. Safe for now. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. He squeezed. He imagined crushing the handle of the Demon Slayer sword. He imagined the weight of the refrigerators. Beep. 156 kilograms. Not bad, Siro commented. Then, a tall boy with multiple arms, Mizo Shoji, squeezed his. Beep. 540 kilograms. What are you, a gorilla? Siro screamed. Izuku sighed. Another loss. Test 3, standing long jump. This was a disaster. Bakugo flew across the sandbox. Aoyama used his laser to propel himself backward. Achiko touched herself and floated over effortlessly. Izuku stood at the line. I can't summon the sword to pole vault. It's too heavy, it would anchor me down. I just have to jump. He jumped. He cleared the sand pit, landing with a roll. It was a good jump for a human. It was pathetic for a superhero. Aizawa scribbled something on his clipboard. Izuku felt the teacher's gaze burning into his back. He's watching me. He sees that I'm not using my quirk. Test 4, repeated sidesteps. Minato was the king here. His balls allowed him to bounce back and forth rapidly. Izuku relied on his agility training. He moved fast, his footwork precise. Left, right. Result, above average. Test 5, the ball throw. This was it. The make or break moment. Uraraka stepped up. She touched the ball. She threw it. The ball floated up. And up. And up. It didn't stop. Aizawa showed the screen. Infinity. Infinity? The class screamed. That's cheating. It's amazing. Izuku felt a cold sweat. How am I supposed to beat infinity? Midoriya, Aizawa called. You're up. Izuku walked to the circle. The atmosphere changed. The class quieted down. They had seen him struggle through the mobility tests, relying on pure athletics. They wanted to see the magic sword. Izuku stood in the circle. He held the ball in his left hand. I can't throw this with my arm strength alone. I'll get maybe 40 or 50 meters. I need the sword. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa was watching him like a hawk. I have one shot. Izuku placed the ball on the ground inside the circle. What's he doing? Kaminari whispered. Izuku reached for the pouch. He undid the clasp. Open. The grimoire burst out of the pouch, hovering in front of Izuku. The pages flipped violently, the sound like a flock of birds taking flight. A dark, heavy pressure descended on the field. The crimson glow of the 5-leaf clover intensified. Whoa, ominous, Siro muttered. Izuku reached into the book. He grabbed the handle of the Demon Slayer sword. Wrath! He pulled. The massive, rusted slab of iron emerged. The tip smashed into the ground inside the circle, cracking the dirt. That's the sword. Ida whispered. The one that stopped the 0-pointer. Izuku took a deep breath. He picked up the ball and tossed it gently into the air. He gripped the sword with both hands, winding up like a baseball batter. Timing. Focus on the timing. Use the flat of the blade. Transfer the kinetic energy. He channeled his strength. The anti-magic flared, coating the sword in black energy. Smash! He swung. But just as the sword was about to connect with the ball, ZZT, the world felt weird. Izuku felt a sudden, jarring sensation. The grimoire jerked in the air, vibrating violently. The anti-magic coating on the sword flickered, but it didn't go out. It felt like someone had tried to turn off a light switch, but the wiring had refused to obey. Izuku's swing faltered for a microsecond due to the distraction, but he followed through. Wham! The flat of the rusted blade connected with the softball. The sound was like a cannon shot. The ball deformed against the iron, then launched. It tore through the air, creating a shockwave that kicked up dust around the circle. It flew. It kept flying. Izuku panted, lowering the sword. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa was standing there, his scarf floating in the air, his hair standing straight up. His eyes were glowing a piercing red. He was using erasure, but the sword was still there. The grimoire was still floating. Aizawa lowered his goggles, blinking. His hair fell back down. He looked confused. Teacher? Izuku asked, the sword tip resting on the ground. Did something happen? Aizawa stared at Izuku. Then he looked at the grimoire. I erased his quirk factor, Aizawa thought, his mind racing. I felt the connection snap. But the book didn't vanish. The sword didn't vanish. Aizawa looked at his hands. Is my quirk malfunctioning? No, I erased the explosive boy earlier just fine. He looked back at Izuku. Is it not a quirk? No, that's impossible. A floating book in a pocket dimension. That has to be a quirk. Unless, it's a mutation type? No, the book is external. Emitter? I should have shut it off. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice guarding his confusion. What is that? It's my grimoire, Izuku said nervously. I tried to erase it, Aizawa stated bluntly. It didn't work. The class gasped. Aizawa-sensei's quirk didn't work.